Ex Nihilo. Talking to dear Moriel Bareli. I saw the long conversation you had with Caroline Glick on JNS TV, and it touched me deeply because everything about it was personal. Today we want to talk about the book you've crowdsourced entitled When a Jew and a Muslim Talk, which is about your experience learning Arabic. But before delving into that, please tell us about yourself. I know you grew up on Long Island in New York and your mother is a yoga teacher. That's what I found out. Would you please tell us more? So what was your childhood like? What was your upbringing like?
Sure. So I grew up in New York, in Long Island, in a Jewish Orthodox family. I would call it a regular Jewish Orthodox, modern Orthodox family, but both of my parents are actually Israeli. Who,
Ah, okay.
yeah, they left Israel when they were younger. Their parents actually left Israel, and so
Ah,
I was raised by two Israeli parents, and my father always spoke to us in Hebrew. We would answer him
ah.
in English. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so my Hebrew is from the house, and so is my Zionism and my love for Israel. Because my dad would always say, let's go back to Israel. That's our true
Oh,
home. That's where we're supposed to be. But of course, the way life is for them, it was very difficult to come back and leave, their jobs and their friends and family and schools and all of that. So what happened was. After each kid finished high school, so my older sister finished high school and she made Aliyah. She moved to Israel 2 years before me,
ah.
and then 2 years
Oh,
later, I finished high school and I
ah,
came to live in Israel. And then same thing with my younger sister, and then my younger brother,
ah.
who was going into
Okay.
ninth grade, actually told my parents. He said, "Look, all of my siblings are already in Israel. In another 4 years, I'm gonna move there as well. So either we all move now, or in 4 years, you guys are gonna stay here
Okay.
by yourself." So they all moved together.
Why did your parents leave Israel in the first place?
Well, their parents left, and
Ah,
it was very difficult times. I mean, it's actually really interesting because let's say for my dad's side, my grandfather fought in all of even before 1948. He was in the underground units.
okay.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
in 1948 he fought, and in 1956, and
Ah,
so he was really like deep, in the history of
yeah.
Israel. And my grandmother was actually born here in 1925 in Jaffa, and she
Oh,
actually spoke
okay.
Arabic fluently. So
Ah,
yeah, so we have pretty strong roots here, but unfortunately, life was very difficult, and the one of my father's brothers, my uncle, he left Israel first, and he got married in New York, so he invited the whole family over, and then they kind
okay.
of, realized that life is a lot easier over there. So but then actually my grandparents came back and lived in Israel until they passed away a few years ago. But all the kids got stuck there.
Ah,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and from my mom's side, they all stayed over there in the United States. But we have it in our blood. We have it in our education. And for me, it was just very obvious. Finish high school, going to Israel to live
Mm,
there, to serve in the army,
okay.
to raise a family, because that's the way it's supposed to be.
Okay.
So, what, and, moving on, thinking about your background, when I looked at your LinkedIn page, it really doesn't say much. It's like you graduate from high school, and then you go to yeshiva, and then there's this entry about your interest in getting jobs with mobile game apps, doing something with that. It's a really weird combination.
Yeah,
What's that about?
the truth is, I probably created that account who knows how many years ago, and I've never used it. Yeah,
Like many people.
yeah, I had an idea to make like a gaming app, but yeah, that's a different.
Okay.
That's in my past.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
what did you move into then? What is sort of your interest? What's your future?
So I
I mean, it
was
sounds like you're writing. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so
Go ahead.
so I wrote this book, When a Jew and a Muslim Talk. I never really thought that I would write a book, but just over the past, I think it's 8 years now. I've been. It started when I started to learn Arabic. I started studying Arabic by myself through different apps and books and YouTube videos and anything I could find. And once I had a good enough basis to actually have conversations with people in Arabic, I started using this app. It's a language exchange app. So I made a profile that I speak English and that I want to learn Arabic. And the app shows me all of the Arabic speakers who want to learn
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
English.
yeah.
So, and then I started speaking with, Arab speakers from all over the Middle East. I focused mostly on those who live here in Israel or in Judea and Samaria, even in Gaza. By the way, even today, I can open the app and
Mm-hmm.
I can speak with people that are currently living in Gaza. And
Oh,
also Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, all the
Yeah.
surrounding countries. And then I even went even further than that to speak with people in Saudi Arabia and the United Emirates and Morocco. And it was so intriguing, the conversations that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was able to
yeah, I
have with
see.
them.
That's really
mm,
interesting because, like, I would say to a certain degree, and that reminds me, you could be my son, like age-wise, like, like I'm
mm,
like an elderly gentleman, so to speak, and
mm-hmm.
my son is like a 33-year-old data scientist living in America now. But like, what I saw and was fascinated, like this kids, looking at these kids growing up, they lived in a digital world, in another digital world, so to speak, playing with computer games, and all of a sudden, like the trajectories into the world, and then the tentacles even like to the outer world, were they kind of open, so they could communicate with everybody. Like, look, I was looking at my kid, etc., and he was playing like online games with guys from Pakistan and whatever. And there's one thing which was really intriguing at your story. So it was like I had the idea, okay, this is a guy like of this digital native generation, etc., being kind of raised up with this idea of the worldwide global communication, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
reaching out, and somehow that you use like this app looked for me like a computer game, as if you were starting a game. Am I totally wrong?
No, it's actually very similar, and that's why it was so, even till today, it's so fun to use because it's almost like a game. I open the app, I search for people from all these countries that I never imagined that I could speak to, and uh,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I actually want to find out certain specific information. So it's kind of like a game. I have to navigate my way with speaking to them. Sometimes I have
Yeah.
all these different cover stories because if they know that I'm Jewish and Israeli, then
Yeah, it's
either
getting complicated.
yeah,
Yeah, an
either they won't
avatar,
talk to
so to
me,
speak.
right?
So the avatar is a necessity for you.
Yeah, 100%. Most of the time, it was the cover
Mm-hmm.
story was an American college student who was learning, studying history and religion, and sometimes I would even say that I'm living in Palestine,
Mm.
studying and learning history and religion. I personally don't use the word Palestine. I don't,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
call
I
it
know.
Israel, but for the cover story, it works great because
Mm-hmm.
if I
Yeah,
would say that
yeah.
I'm in Israel right away, that means that I'm
Yeah.
a certain type of
Outcast.
person, an outcast, right? So that was one cover story. Another cover story, I would say that I'm actually a Muslim Syrian who's living
Oh,
in New York, who was born and raised in New York, and that I never had, like, my parents didn't teach me anything about Islam. They
oh,
didn't teach me
okay.
any
Oh,
Arabic because they want me
As a
to be
Muslim analphabet, so to speak.
exactly. So right, so that way I could ask
interesting.
questions about Islam. I could ask, and
Yeah,
also if I have mistakes in Arabic, they won't think it's weird.
yeah,
But those cover stories really gave me the opportunity to speak with people
yeah,
kind of in an
yeah, yeah.
unfiltered way.
Yeah, yeah, that is interesting because it's kind of like a strange anthropological way of starting to gather
Yeah,
sort
because
of this from, yeah.
right. The truth is, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, there are a lot of experts out there talking about
Mm,
Islam, talking about what's
mm,
going on in Syria or in
mm.
Lebanon. But
Mm-hmm.
in the end of the day, what do the real people
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
think? The regular civilians, not
yeah,
just
yeah.
what we see in the
Mm-hmm.
headlines and not just what the academia says or the,
Mm,
the leaders of these countries. What do the actual people themselves think? And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what's so fascinating about the conversations I was able to have.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then that's the problem of the experts. You really want to know what's going on. Or
Uh,
is it?
well, unfortunately, I don't think there's enough of. an accent, meaning like they don't highlight enough the importance of learning Arabic in this country, even though there are so many, Arab Israelis and it's a
Yeah, yeah, like 20% of the,
right,
almost 20% of the population.
right, 20% of the
Yeah.
population, and then there's also the Arabs in Judea and Samaria, which is another. Depends how you count them, but
Yeah.
another million or two. And I live in Samaria, and
Mm,
we're surrounded by Arabs here. We unfortunately don't really have an interaction with them because it's either violent or nothing.
mm,
But in Israel, like in the borders of Israel proper, there's interactions on a daily basis with the Arab community. If it's in work, if it's in the street, if it's on the bus, everywhere. So it's
mm.
very, very important, but not enough people learn the language. They don't teach it in schools. I mean, they teach it in schools, but not at a level that people actually know how to speak the language. Like my younger brother, he studied Arabic in school at like the
Okay.
basically the highest level
Mm,
that you can learn it in school, and he got like his grades were all A+, 100, whatever, but he can't have a conversation in Arabic. He studied the modern standard Arabic,
the grammars.
the grammar, and how to
Mm,
read a paragraph and answer the
mm,
question,
mm,
but he doesn't really understand the language, so it's unfortunate. The truth is, actually, I teach Arabic
mm.
today, and I built a digital course. It's in Hebrew to
Ah,
Arabic.
okay.
I have to do one English to Arabic as well, but
Okay.
so yeah, a lot of people are very, very interested and understand the importance of it.
How does it play out in everyday life? So you like tell us about you lived in this dormitory, like you're surrounded by Arabs, like you came from New York, you were like 18 or 20, etc. And all of a sudden, like your father's tongue, or better say, like the remnants of the Arabic language were all spread all over. So how did you get into contact with these first guys on the street? Like, was there like, or was it easier to get into this game environment, like with this course, than talking to Arabs on the street? I can.
No, so it was definitely much easier and safer to do it through the app and speak to
Really?
people. Yeah, 100%. I mean, here, first of all, where my dorms were in the yeshiva, the place where I studied
Yeah.
Torah, and it was in Jerusalem in the old city.
Yeah.
And the neighborhoods over there, the Muslim neighborhoods, aren't very friendly to Jews,
So Harrod's
especially.
Gate is a real problem. Like you pass it and you get into problems as a
Yeah,
Jew.
I mean, it's very unfortunate, but especially
Mm.
during the times that I was studying there, if you remember in
Yeah.
2016, it was called the
Yeah.
Knife Intifada. There was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
stabbing
Yes.
attacks almost on a
Yeah.
daily basis, and also hit and run accidents, incidents,
Yeah.
and things
Yeah.
like that. Almost every day we would pass through the Damascus Gate or Herod's Gate, and
Mm.
before or after we would go through, we would hear that there was a stabbing attack and things like that. So we actually couldn't, from the dorms to the yeshiva where we were studying, we weren't allowed to walk by ourselves. We had to go in,
Really?
yeah, we were, how do you say, there were two security guards that would have to walk with us,
Oh,
one,
okay.
one in the front and
Oh,
one in the
okay.
back, because we were
Which is
crossing
weird.
through,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we were crossing through the.
Enemy's land, so to speak.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
there are Jews who live there in those areas, or
Mm.
Jews who come and cross through the Muslim quarters every day, and thank God nothing happens to them. But every so often, and it's way too often, there of course are attacks. So what I actually did after a while, where I was speaking to people through the
Mm.
app, I did want to go and see what was happening on the ground, face to
Okay.
face,
Like
and
cover, put your cover again.
exactly. So I dressed up. I got disguised as an American. So you hear my accent. For me, it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually walked around there in Eastern Jerusalem in the Muslim neighborhoods, and I kind of interviewed people to ask them, what they. Actually wanted to film it, to record it, but I was
Oh,
worried.
wonderful.
Yeah, I was worried though that people would kind of see it as suspicious if I had like an
Yeah.
undercover
Yeah.
camera or something like that.
Yeah.
So I didn't do it, but I was walking around and asking people what they think about the connection between the Jewish people and the land, right? The land of Palestine. And I
Okay.
already knew the answer because spoken to
Yeah.
dozens
Yeah.
of people about this,
Yeah.
and they all told me that the Jews have no connection to the land. They have
Yeah.
no history.
Yeah.
They have no religious connection either.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe soon we can go into the deeper into that. But
Yeah.
I was asking these questions and I was getting the same answers. And then I sat with this guy in his office in his shop, and I asked him this question. He told me the Jews have no connection to the land. And then I thought of another question. I said, why did the British promise a Jewish homeland here specifically? If it, right, the 1917 Balfour Declaration, if the Jews
Exactly,
have
in the
no
white
connection to
paper.
right, if
Yeah.
they have no connection to this land. So he says, "Oh, you didn't learn about that in your university in New York."
Okay.
So
Ah,
I
yeah, poor you.
right.
Yeah.
So I told him I guess I wasn't listening well enough. So he said, I'll tell you the true history of the Balfour Declaration." He said in England, the Jews were murderers, rapists. They were stealing. They were committing all the worst crimes you could imagine. And the British just wanted to get rid of
Want
them.
to get rid of him.
Exactly. And they just won a world war and new pieces of land. So they threw them here into Palestine. And now we have to deal with this garbage. So I was obviously blown away, but I couldn't show it. You know, I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, now I remember that that's what we learned, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so those were the kinds of, experiences that stuck with me. And unfortunately, some of them were scary and
Yeah.
mind blowing that they have this crazy twisted narrative
Yeah.
of the Jewish people and our history
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
no history in this land.
And
Yeah,
but it's
which
a very interesting situation because it's kind of schizophrenic, is it? Like you're in the internet, etc. You're communicating with people, getting really intimate in many ways, like, getting to know them, like on the ground in a way, like a digital ground in this case. But when you like move outside, it's like kind of like walking to enemy's land. It's kind of like even more dangerous than communicating like digital, which is like a weird conversion, like of everything, like people take for granted, is it?
Yeah, actually, and there were some people that I was in touch with over digitally for a long time, and I was always using my cover story that,
Yeah.
I would tell them that I'm not Jewish or that I'm not married, that I'm American, that I'm living in the United States. But and then, I would go back to my day-to-day life, and it's like you're saying, it was like I had these two different personalities,
Yeah.
and eventually it was hard for me to be living this dual life with someone that I would be speaking to for months, and we actually had a good
Yeah,
relationship,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so then
yes.
sometimes I would say
You would feel guilty
I'd
of
feel
betraying
guilty,
people.
and then I would feel guilty, but then I would tell them, I have something to tell you. I was scared to tell you this before, but now that we've been speaking for 3 months, and I see that you're a good person, and you think I'm a good person, and we can get along together. I just wanted to tell you that I'm actually Jewish and I actually live in Israel. And
And
almost every time, I you know they were like shocked, and they told me, I can't speak to you, you're Israeli, I can't be speaking to you, there's no. And I was like, but why, what's the problem? Let's put the whole so-called Israeli
Yeah,
Palestinian conflict aside.
yeah,
I'm an individual, you're an individual,
yeah.
we've been speaking for
It's
a
me.
few months.
Mm,
We both know that we're both decent people, so
mm,
what's the problem?
mm.
But they couldn't accept it, and it was kind of heartbreaking, in a sense,
Oh yeah,
that
weird.
there's so much hatred, and like for no reason, in the
Yeah.
sense that even two individuals can't have a regular conversation, and it
Yeah,
happened way too many times.
I
weird.
was curious about that. What do you think exactly lies behind this? What is it that's so implicit in the culture that makes this anger and this hatred there so strong?
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question that I think really, I'm not the only one who talks about this, but unfortunately it's not spoken about enough at all. And I really uncovered it through the conversations that I was having with these people. And again, not through just research and academia and things like that, but actually to listen to the people
Yeah.
themselves and understand their views. So I'll give you an example. I spoke to someone from Gaza. This was a few years ago. And then something happened, and he got upset at me. At first, I told him I was Jewish and Israeli. He actually didn't. He didn't
I
really
didn't
care.
get it. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, no, he was like, you know what? I wouldn't be speaking to you,
mm,
outside of
Mm.
this app, but let's put that aside and just focus on learning
Okay, cool.
languages. So I said, okay, that's great. I respect that.
Mm.
But then something happened. I don't remember exactly what, but he got upset at me, like upset about the Israelis. And he said, you Israelis are killing our women and children and you're
Mm.
stealing our land. And I said, one second, I want to ask you a question. What do you mean we're stealing your land? You Muslims
Mm.
took this land, you conquered it from whoever
Mm.
was here before you, from the Christians, from
Mm.
the
Mm.
before the Ottomans and all the different
Mm.
regimes, that the different Arab regimes. The Arab conquest, they conquered the land from the Byzantines, who were the Romans before that, and the Romans took
Long
it
story,
from
yeah.
the Greeks, and the Greeks from the Persians
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yeah,
Babylonians
yeah,
until they took it
yeah.
from the Jews. So this is what I told him, and he says, "Wow, study history. The Jews never had any sovereignty in this land before
Yeah,
1948."
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I was shocked, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand where this was coming from. And
Yeah.
then, for example, I spoke to a girl from Jerusalem, a Muslim girl from Jerusalem, and I asked her. I told her that I'm American, and I asked her where she's from. And then she says, "I'm from Palestine. Do you know anything about
Mm.
Palestine?" So I said, "Yeah, a little bit." And she goes, "I'm from Jerusalem, the capital of Palestine." So I said, "Since when?" And she said, "Since the times of the Canaanites." And
Yeah, okay.
the truth is, I told her the truth is that Jerusalem was never the capital of any Muslim
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
entity in this land. There were different cities,
Palestine is an artifice.
right? So, but so she tells me the temple that the Jews claim that belongs to
Yeah,
them,
yeah,
which doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exist, right? But the mosque, the Al Aqsa Mosque, was built
yeah,
by Abraham, who was a
yeah,
Muslim.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
therefore, the land belongs to us Muslims and not to the Jews.
One step back, because like I'm really interested like how you made it. Like you decided to offer English lessons in exchange for Arabic. Tell us what kind of people responded to you. The deal English for Arabic. What are these people? Certainly not believers who think that they're talking to guys from like the big sad
Mm-hmm.
Satan, etc. If you wanted to characterize your interlocutors like an anthropologist or sociologist, how would you do that? What kind of people were you talking to? Like sociologically, psychologically, young guys. I think gamers like my son, maybe.
Well, it actually varies. The app is there are people there who are 18, and there are people there who are 40 or 50.
Ah,
Um,
okay,
yeah, some of them are college
Mm-hmm.
students, some of them are already, engineers or teachers,
okay.
or basically pretty much anyone. Um, there's some of them were religious, some of them were less religious, more religious, but there was really like a very big variety of people from all over. It wasn't like a specific group.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely say it was a very very big variety of ages
And the
and
motivation,
religion.
the motivation was like getting an advancement, like in business, or like being able to speak English,
Yeah.
like to promote like your skills, etc. So what was
Yeah,
the?
a lot of
Okay.
times if it was college students, they needed it for
Mm.
college or for work after college.
Ah, okay.
English obviously comes in handy.
Okay.
Or those, yeah, some people who were working in certain
Yeah.
jobs that English would
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
advance them in their jobs. And there were also those who were living in Europe or those who were living in
Yeah.
the
Okay.
United States. So they obviously
Mm-hmm.
wanted to learn, English. Or there are plenty that I spoke to from Germany, for example,
Ah.
Syrian
Syrian
refugees.
refugees. Okay, like in
Yeah,
Germany now. Okay.
plenty, plenty. You guys have a
So what
lot of.
did what did they tell you? Like living in Germany, all of a sudden, like would they understand the country they entered?
So right, so always a good question. How much do they kind of assimilate
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
into the countries that they go into, and how much do they stay stuck in their previous
Community. Mm.
communities and beliefs and understandings. The truth is, I always really just focused on what they think about the Jews, not
Ah,
so
okay.
much about, let's say, what they think about Christians or what they
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
Europe or
Yeah.
how assimilated they are.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting is that sometimes I would speak to someone, for example, from Germany, who would tell me like, yeah, life, he ran away from Syria. His family is still stuck there, but he was able to escape. So now he's living in Germany and he's has an apartment and he goes to college and he's living his life. He goes out and
Okay.
probably has fun and everything is okay. But his
Mm-hmm.
beliefs and what his perspective of history and the Jews and the whole conflict and all of that is the same as anyone.
Unchanged.
Yeah, unchanged. Maybe who knows? Maybe after a few generations, it might change, but definitely not the first generation. Probably not even the second generation.
And that was what I was wondering, if you came across anybody that wanted to learn English in exchange for Arabic, where had more of a Western outlook or not. And it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like it's really ground into their being. Did
Right.
you talk to anybody from Iran that's more of the Persian side of things, that's not into Arabic as much as maybe Farsi?
Unfortunately, not because the app is also like it's very specific.
Mm-hmm.
If I chose
Yeah.
Arabic to English, then it only shows me Arabic speakers.
Yeah, I was
So
wondering if there were any sort of Iranian source that were speaking Arabic
right,
that showed up, but yeah, maybe
right.
not.
I have spoken outside of the app. Actually, recently I've
Mm-hmm.
spoken to someone who from Iran, but is not Persian and is
Mm-hmm.
not Shiite. So they're
Mm-hmm.
Arab Sunnis who live in an area called Ahwaz.
Yeah.
So they're a
Mm-hmm.
minority from the religious side, being Sunni and not Shiite, and also from the ethnic side, being Arab and not Persian. So they're actually oppressed by the Iranians as much as
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
as much as the
Yeah.
Jews are as well. And
Yeah.
even in Syria, you
Mm-hmm.
have Hezbollah, which is
Yeah.
fighting against Israel, but they're also oppressing and killing
Yeah. Yeah.
Syrians
Yeah. Yeah.
in Syria because they're Sunni and not Shiites.
Yeah.
So I actually got a chance to speak to someone from there, from
Mm-hmm.
Iran, who is an Arab Sunni, and he claimed that he and his whole community actually really have a very positive perspective of the Jews, and that's how they understand the Quran and their Islamic literature. That it's very positive regarding the Jews, which was very interesting for me to see because I've been speaking for years to people from all over,
Yeah.
and it was like the exact opposite of what I've heard from the rest of the Muslims that I've spoken to. But there definitely are those who actually
Sure.
have a very positive perspective. What's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting is to try to figure out why and how. How does and I
Mm-hmm.
asked
Mm-hmm.
I asked him this, and he didn't have an answer for me, because I told him I was like, wow, your perspective of the Jews and Israel is incredible. I've never heard this before. I've actually heard the exact opposite. So he told me it's all politics. It's all
Really?
all these. It's all Iran or Iran trying to influence this hatred towards Israel and the West and the Jews, but that's not what really Islam is about. So I don't really buy that story. And
Mm-hmm.
I told him, I said, look, but I've spoken, for example, to Syrians, Sunni
Mm-hmm.
Syrians who are being oppressed by the Shiites of Hezbollah and things like that, and they hate the Jews, just as much as anyone else. So why? And they're also like against Iran. So why are you, who's against Iran, uh, how,
Exempt.
right? Why are you
Yeah.
exempt? How do you have this perspective? But he has a very opposite perspective. So he actually didn't have an answer for me. And I'm still trying to do my research to figure that out because if there's like a key factor to why certain
Mm-hmm.
communities in the Muslim world have a positive perspective of Israel and the Jews, then we have to try to replicate that into the other areas
Sure.
as well.
That's a fascinating research question. But we come back to that a little further down the road. Um, yeah.
I'm kind of interested still in your and your props and your makeup of the situation, because like living
Mm-hmm.
this cover, etc., means that you have to take care of all this video, of all this surrounding your environment. You didn't wear a kippah, I guess, so to unmask yourself as a Jew. So were you you were kind of cautious, were you like doing and how did this being cautious change your perspective on your own like Jewishness in a way,
Hmm.
like because like hiding away like your identity in a way means that you have to display something like an avatar. So what changed for you?
Well, first of all, most of the conversations that I had were over, messaging or like voice notes,
Ah,
or
okay,
I could call through the app as well, but it wasn't video.
okay, it was a
Um,
video. Okay,
right. But there
Mm-hmm.
were certain circumstances where, like I told you guys, that I went into Eastern Jerusalem. I
yeah,
also went in undercover into Bethlehem, right, in
Mm-hmm.
Judea. And so over there, I obviously couldn't wear, kippah or anything
mm,
Jewish. I even
mm,
left behind like all of my credit cards,
mm.
anything that would have any Hebrew on it. I changed my phone to English. I changed my parents' names on my phone to, so if they would call me, no one would see Abba, they would just see Dad. So
So you were kind of perfectionist in this regard.
yeah, but actually, so one
Mm-hmm.
time, I
Yeah.
actually went into a store in East Jerusalem,
Mm,
and then the guy looks at me and he goes, so I was telling him my cover story that I'm a college student from
mm,
America, whatever, and he
mm.
goes, "Are you sure you're not Israeli?" And I was like, "Oh no,
Oh.
I blew my cover." So I was like, "Why?" Because I have a big nose. I started getting upset at him to like play the part. And he was like, "Are you sure your parents aren't from Tel Aviv or something like that?" And I was like, "Oh my God, he really knows." Because actually, my dad is from Tel Aviv. So I was like, I got upset at him and like threw a fit or something and walked out of the store. But that was scary because and then because I asked him, I was like, "What, do you work a lot with Israelis? So why do you think I'm Israeli?" So he said, "Yeah, I work all the time with Israelis." So he obviously could recognize that I'm not I don't look very American. I look more Israeli. And one
Yeah.
time, a similar story, I actually through video chat on the app, I spoke to someone from uh, Qatar, and
Mm,
he and so I said, "Yeah, hi, my name is Mike on the app. My name
Mike.
is
Okay.
Mike from New York." And he looks at me and he goes, "You don't look like you're from New York. You look like you're from our area." And I was like, you know what? Yes, I actually am. I'm from Israel." So he was like, "Israel?" He started cursing Israel, and I was like, "So what do what do you support? You support Hamas?" And he says, "Of course I support Hamas." And it was like such an obvious for him. It was such an obvious answer. He wasn't saying it like in my face, like, "Yeah, I support Hamas and I hate Israel." He was like serious. He was like, "Of course. What other
Mm,
option is there?" For him,
yeah.
it's so obvious. The Hamas are like the
So,
freedom fighters and Israel are the terrorists. It's just a crazy, twisted narrative that they have. And back to I forgot who asked the question, but about the hatred, there's
Mm,
so much incitement and so much propaganda today that it's a very, very big problem. Even people who might not have been indoctrinated by religious hatred, there's so much out there on the social media that it's so easy to take in this hatred from all over, hatred towards Israel and towards the Jews. And unfortunately, sometimes I speak to people on the app and they say all these crazy things about Israel and the Jews, and I tell them, I wish you could just come to Israel, come visit. I'll personally take you around. I'll show you around. I just want you to see the reality for yourself, and it'll change your mind. Right. And I'm talking to someone
yeah.
from like Syria or, it's obviously not going to happen, but
That's very funny. Like we had a
It
talk with
is.
Matthias Künzel. He's a German like historian, and like when you go back into the 20s and 10s, like the beginning of Zionism, etc., all the European Jews, like for ideological, even communist reasons, going to Israel, etc. So the like the Egyptians, they cherished them because it was like bringing money and bringing modernity
Yeah.
to the Arab world. So there was like a there was like a, even a welcoming mood in the beginning of it all. But then later on, like, and that was a story which really shocked me in many ways because, like, it's a weird story. Like there was like a German radio program, like the Mufti of Jerusalem, the Grand Mufti, like he was like one of these big perpetrators in this regard. So like it was Nazi propaganda, yelling out stuff like anti-Semitic stuff, like against the Jews all over, and like everybody like in the Arab world was absolutely fascinated by these radio sermons, etc. So in a way you could say like all these anti-Semitic things like pogroms like in the 25, etc., they built up over like 30 years, etc. It was like ammunitioned by Nazi propaganda. There was something really like horrifying, like it's that you see like in the beginning it was kind of different because it was like the idea that the Arab world would get modernized in a way, like because the Jews were educated, they were erudite, they had professorships, etc., etc. And all of a sudden it turned into something like these are the perverts, these are weird, the weirdos, like and like the subhuman beings, etc., which is weird. It's a totally weird story.
Yeah, so I agree with you on one side that there definitely was a type of Nazi propaganda that was brought in through Hajj Amin al-Husseini,
Yeah,
the Mufti of
yeah, yeah.
Jerusalem, but it doesn't start there. And a lot of people
No,
like
just
to
like
like to make that argument that the Jews lived in the Muslim Arab world in peace forever and ever, and and it's only because of the Zionists and they started stealing land and they started doing all these things. So that's where the whole conflict starts. So for anyone who actually knows history, that's obviously not true. Even before the
sure,
even before the 20th century, there were pogroms in
yeah,
Muslim
yeah,
countries
yeah, yeah.
against Jews, and Maimonides, who wrote one of the biggest Jewish rabbis, who
Yeah.
wrote about 900 years ago a letter to the Jews in Yemen who were undergoing oppression and forced conversion to Islam. He
Mm.
wrote them a letter to strengthen them, but he also wrote basically they did the most damage to the Jewish people than any other people, and they always um, strengthen the hatred towards the Jews and always try to put the Jews down.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
codified in the Quran, it's codified in the Hadiths, etc. Yeah, like
exactly
the
so.
moment when the apocalyptic comes, etc., the Jews hide behind the bushes, etc., and the bushes talk. Okay, there's a coward behind me. Kill him. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very obvious that it stems from a lot of the Islamic teachings that are very, very negative and hateful
Yeah.
towards the Jews. But another perspective that a lot of people don't know is the perspective of the Jews according to Islam. So you know, uh, there are some Muslims who say, "What do you mean? Just look at the Quran. There are all these verses that talk very positively about the Jews. For example,
Mm.
that we chose, God is speaking and saying, we chose the people of Israel to be above all of the other nations. We promised the land to the people of Israel, all these things. But
Mm.
you have to pay attention that they always use the word the people of Israel and not the Jews. And then there are
Mm.
other verses that curse the Jews because the Jews are not the people of Israel, meaning the people of Israel actually, according to Islam, they themselves were Muslim. And so was Abraham, like the
Yeah.
girl
Yeah.
from Jerusalem
Yeah.
told me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even
This funny story.
right, and even Adam, the first man himself, was Muslim. So, but what does that mean, right? How could someone be
Exactly.
Muslim, thousands and thousands of years ago, thousands of years before Muhammad ever came to the world? So that's why it's also important to understand Arabic and to understand the culture and the mindset. So the word Islam in Arabic means submission,
Submission.
to
Yeah.
submit yourself fully to
Yeah.
one God. So the way to submit yourself to God is obviously to believe that there's one God and to believe in all of his prophets, because that's how you know what God wants from you. If you listen to the prophets, you'll know what he wants from you. So if that's the definition, then we can probably all agree that we can call Adam Muslim, we can call Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and the people of Israel. They're all Muslims in that sense. So where does the problem start? The problem starts where, according to the Quran, the people of Israel started moving away from Islam. They started sinning and killing the prophets that were sent to them. And they changed the scriptures of the Torah and they moved away from God. They left
Yeah, yeah, the
God.
perverts.
Exactly. So therefore,
Mm-hmm.
God left them. And then they became Jews, and the Jews lost that, the promise to the land. They are no longer the chosen people. They're cursed. They have to stay in the diaspora, and they have no connection to the land of Israel or Palestine, whatever they want to call it. And the fact that the people of Israel, the Jewish people, came back to the land, and our prophecies have come true, it's a direct, what's the word? A collision. It's a direct
It's a
collision
collision, yeah.
with this theology of Islam, that the Jews are supposed to stay under the rule of Islam
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah,
Muslim countries. And when
yeah.
it's like that, they could say,
It's fine.
it's fine.
They pay tax.
Yeah, if you pay
Yeah.
tax, we'll treat you well. Once in a while, we'll have, we'll murder some
We
of
just
you.
spit on you a little bit.
Yeah,
It's okay. Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. Yeah, I hear this from a friend, and it's really funny because as he'll say, no, we really don't hate the Jews. You just spit on them a little bit, and that you need to come and you just need to talk to Muslims because you see in the everyday world that it's all just fine. And then
Right.
he talks about, but there's just this rabble, but it's
I mean,
still there.
I see your amazement because of what you see in all these stories is kind of like a real lack of philology, understanding what
Yeah.
a written letter means. So there's no history, in fact. And that's one thing which is like that fascinated me very much. It said like Muhammad was an analphabet, and like the reason that he was an analphabet is the proof that it's really the written word of God, which is like
Right.
which is crazy, which is like where you can modify anything. But if you get into a Christian, like a Jewish context, you always have philology. You have the question of interpretation. You have the question if the prophet is talking the right thing, etc. Meaning it's a fabric of man, like kind of like a shadow of some maybe some revelation in it, but it's written
Hmm.
by man. And this realization is totally absent, and that's I think the reason why you can say that all these Jews were like it's a lack of history, like lack of writing, in fact. Um, Really sad story.
And the thing is that it's, really something that's prominent in their everyday life and view of the world. So when I would speak to the people on the app, for example, I went into this group chat. It's like a Muslim group chat where they,
Hmm.
or Arabic group chat where they study English together and whatever.
Mm.
But it was something specific to Islam in English, right? So it was like a Muslim group chat. So I went in and I asked in the group. I said, "Hi guys, I'm learning about Islam and whatever, and I wanted to ask why did did God send so many prophets to the people of Israel, to the you know if and why not to other
Yeah,
nations?"
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So so I have screenshots in my book, by the way. I bring all
Hmm.
these screenshots of the conversations. So one after the other, they're saying, because they're the worst nation on the face of the earth. If you have a disease, you'll send all of your doctors to this place to try to heal them. So that's what God was trying to
That's
do.
the explanation.
Right. But they
Okay.
never listened. They were always deaf and blind, like it says in the Quran. Um, and they never listened, and they turned away from God, and they're arrogant, and going on and on and on. So none of them said, "Oh, it's because the people of Israel are the chosen people, and the Jews today are still connected to those people of Israel." None of them gave me that answer.
Yeah.
There are, so again, like the guy from the the Arab Sunni from Iran, who
Hmm.
actually does have a positive view. And there are even some
Mm.
Arab Israelis here that I've spoken to that have a positive view from within Islam. but unfortunately, the majority, almost I would say probably 95% of the Muslims, at least in the Arab Muslim world, this is the perspective that they have. This is what they grew up on. This is what they learn in school and in the mosque and
Mm.
everywhere.
Yeah. How did you explain it to yourself? So I mean, I imagine you're in a conversation with somebody really nice, and like you're getting like even intimate to a certain degree. There's even like a mental eroticism, maybe because like every exchange is kind of erotic in a way. I would say, and like one one's getting approaching each other, and like knowing about the details of the life of the other, and on the other hand, listening, like having to hear that stuff. How did you bring this into like a not a cognitive dissonance, but like into a
Make
harmony?
sense of it.
How could you bring it together? Like, so you like this guy, and all of a sudden he comes with this weird stories about like some pervert, like a race, etc., which has to be erased from the earth.
If you get through these conversations and you do all of this, do any of these any of these turn into friendships after all of this is done? How does this work? This is an interesting question.
Maybe I'll start with the friendships, actually. I had some people that I was in touch with for a very long time, for a few years. And then, unfortunately, when I drafted to the army, I had to
Oh,
disconnect and I had to
mm,
delete their numbers and things
mm,
like that. Um, and actually, one of them, this was a girl from Bethlehem that I was in touch with for a while, and then she invited me to come to show me around, and I went there. We spent like a whole day there. Was really interesting. But then when I drafted to the army, I had to cut that connection. But after I
mm,
finished the army, I actually spoke to her again, and we were in touch again for a few years,
mm.
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much until October 7th.
Ah, okay.
And then after October 7th, I didn't even want to speak to her, honestly, for a while.
Mm,
But then after a few months, I kind of like calmed down a little bit, and I was like, actually, I'd like to
mm,
reach out to her and see,
mm,
actually maybe see what her opinions are,
mm.
what's going on, whatever. And before October 7th, we were speaking, and she was getting married. She was supposed to get married to someone
Mm,
from somewhere else. Um, and so after a few months after October 7th, I, opened up, I had her number. I went into
mm.
WhatsApp and I tried to send her a message, and I saw that she blocked me. So I don't
Ah,
know if it was because of, the war and everything, or because she got married and maybe, it's
mm.
no longer allowed for her.
Jealousy.
Right.
Mm,
No longer allowed for her. But, so now I'm not in touch with her anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there were other people that I would speak to, and I had this like mission that I would speak to them and, do whatever I had to do just to find out certain information.
ah,
So
okay.
sometimes I felt a little
Mm-hmm.
guilty about it, like I said, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would speak to them for, let's say, a few weeks, and then I would ask them the question that I want to ask, and then they would answer. I would take a screenshot, and that's it. I wouldn't even speak to
Okay.
them anymore. So it was kind of like I'm like on this mission really to just find out
Understand it.
and
Mm,
understand more. So
mm,
sometimes it
mm.
turned out that way, that I kind of had to be like an undercover agent, and
In the
Yeah.
conversation with Caroline Glick, you said like it turned out to be almost an addiction. So all talking to all these guys for so many years, like hundreds of them, in fact. So how did you explain it to your beloved ones, like friends or maybe
Exactly.
your wife, etc.? So
Mm-hmm.
how could you explain like all these like intricacies, like these weird things going on in your head, and what were they asking and responding to you?
yeah, so it's funny, my wife, a lot of times I'll be in the middle of the night, I'll be texting someone, and she's like, what are you doing? Who are you
What are you
talking
doing?
to? I was like, oh, it's just some guy from Syria or some girl from Lebanon or whatever. She's like, what are you doing? And or but it's
Secret agent
right.
Moriel.
But it was just so fascinating. Even just the fact that I'm able to speak, or someone from Gaza right now in the middle of the
Yeah,
war.
yeah,
It's just so fascinating that I'm even able to do this.
yeah,
That in itself is almost addictive, and the
yeah,
information that I was able to
yeah,
uncover.
yeah.
So yeah, and also when I was really like into it in the beginning, when I was studying in yeshiva. So a
Mm.
lot of times it was like, I write this in my book, like what would my friends, I'm supposed to be sitting in the yeshiva studying Torah, and I'm like in the middle of
Mm,
Bethlehem drinking coffee with some Arab girl and then her mother in her house. It's like it's really weird, you know. But like on the other hand, it's like wow, King David, this is where he was born, and this is where he lived, and maybe
Yeah,
he
yeah,
walked
yeah, yeah,
around and ate from the trees over here. So
yeah, yeah.
it was always this. On one side, it was very weird and crazy, and sometimes dangerous. But on the other hand, it was so fascinating and so intriguing that and I guess sometimes I did some stupid stuff like going into Bethlehem uh, by myself. I never met her before. I only spoke to her on the phone.
Mm,
She could have been herself an undercover
mm,
who was working for a
mm,
terrorist organization, you know.
mm,
So I tried to be careful. Like when I was on the way
mm,
there on the bus, um, so I arrived at the location that we were supposed to meet, but I told her that the bus was running late and there was a
mm,
bunch of traffic.
mm,
So that way I was able to get off the bus and go up to like a lookout spot and kind of,
mm.
check out the area to see if
mm.
anyone's waiting for me. It was kind of stupid, but whatever. I did this before I was married, so now my wife doesn't let me do it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, it seems like, I mean, and this kind of comes back to what everything you're saying, and maybe kind of pulling it into a sharper relief. Islam seems like this very political way of life that controls every detail of their lives, down to whether you can use toilet paper or not, where if books can be printed or not. Do you feel that kind of control when you're talking to these people? That there's this much of a control over their lives?
It depends. There are some people that I spoke to that it was more prominent. For example, one girl that I spoke to, actually
Mm-hmm.
Arab Israeli,
Mm-hmm.
she told me that she's not supposed to be speaking to boys, um,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
and she's not even supposed to listen to music. According to
Oh,
Islam, you're not supposed to listen to like modern music.
yeah, yeah,
Only only recitements of the Quran
yeah,
and
yeah.
things like that. But I think, especially let's say here in Israel or Judea and Samaria, the Muslims here aren't. I don't think I would call them that religious in the sense where they even know all of these, intricate little nuances
Ah,
about the religion. What they,
interesting.
yeah, I don't think that it's at that level. A lot of them aren't
Mm-hmm.
very religious in that
Yeah, yeah.
sense, but what they
Mm-hmm.
are religious in is this indoctrination of their
Mm.
understanding because they're
Political Islam.
right. It's exactly
Mm-hmm.
that's where it
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
really comes together, and like the actual religious side is kind of not so strong here.
Getting back again to this game environment, like as I was starting with, I was invited by the Goethe Institute to Pakistan, Karachi, like teaching like Pakistani students. I knew somehow, okay, it's like bridging like a cultural gap, etc. Uh, and I was thinking, what can I do? What can I really like sincerely say? Because they were veiled and they were looking for players, like oh stupid stuff. I couldn't even think. I mean, myself, I'm like a son of like 7 generations pastors before me, so religion is very far distant in many ways. Like because I know it. Like, but the funny things like okay, so I asked them okay because I saw like everybody would have a smartphone. I asked them, would you exchange your smartphone for a dump phone? And I would hear, what? Are you crazy? My wonderful smartphone. And then I made them like, we televised all this. I said, okay, let's talk about the smartphone. What does it mean for you? How does it change your life? And all of a sudden they were saying, okay, I'm using my smartphone to be all alone in my room, etc. I'm not sitting down there in the family altar and looking some stupid television something. I want to connect with the world, so to speak. And so we recorded all that stuff, etc. And in the end, like everybody got like the idea, okay, like it's changing my life. It's changing my. It's even formatting my life in many ways that like the like Muslim like any religion does not cope with. So I would say like what I was seeing here was like not only cognitive dissonance in real time, but it was like a problem of modernization. They want to have like the devices, but they don't want to pay the entry price for it. Like so, what does it mean to use a computer? You have to pay a price for that, like because it changes your religion. It changes those stuff. I would say like a lot of the stuff like you're talking about is like a modernization problem, is it? And Israel like being like the startup nation like in this environment being like a total like a foreign body. Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I think that Islam is a religion that has the ability to adapt. They on one side they're very, very traditional. On the other side, they know how to adapt the laws of the religion to modern times. It's actually very similar to Judaism in that sense that we
Yeah,
also have these very, nuanced laws
yeah,
of every
Mm-hmm.
little thing in our life.
yeah,
Like you said, even how to use the restroom and things like that. There's actually laws for every single thing, and in Islam, it's very, very similar. Um, um, Actually, there are many laws that
Mm.
are basically taken from
yeah, yeah,
Judaism.
yeah.
Interesting.
Just to
Like
give
kind
Yeah.
of
you
copy.
yeah, just to give you one quick example, in Judaism, if you need to, it's time to pray, and let's say you're in the middle of nowhere, you're supposed to wash your hands before you
Yeah,
pray.
yeah,
But if you
yeah.
don't have you don't have water, you can, clean your hands on a cloth or in the sand or
Mm,
something like that. So it's the exact same laws
mm,
in Islam. If you're in the
yeah,
desert and you don't have water, you rub your hands in the sand and you're able to pray. So all these little details, and also taking into account like modern things. How do you deal with smartphones and computers and things like that? In Judaism and in Islam, there are kind of ways to make these new laws to adapt to reality. What I find interesting is, for example, certain communities, let's say here in Israel, the more you go south to certain Arab areas, they're
mm.
more agricultural, they're more traditional. They don't have smartphones, and
Ah, yeah,
and
yeah.
they're more, I would say, more relaxed regarding their hatred towards the
Ah,
Jews. And here, where I live in Samaria, they're much more modernized. The
yeah.
cities
Like
here,
hyped up because
yeah.
like social media and
So
stuff.
Interesting.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's where I see like a real
Oh, okay.
influence.
Yeah, yeah.